All right, welcome back to the tutorial again. So in the previous tutorial, we ended where we created our basic routes, but we haven't created that. We just got our URL from the request.url. So from here, we can now continue creating our basic routes. So for the purpose of this class, we should be having like 3 routes, 3 routes, something like that. So let's use an if statement to differentiate between the routes. So we can now do an if statement here. If URL is equal to slash, so if our URL is equal to a slash, we actually want to show something to the user. So if URL is equal to slash, we want to do something. Else, if the URL is equal to something else, we also want to do something again. We can do if URL is equal to slash message. We want to show something else to the user, something like that. So let's start with this. If URL is slash, that means if the person didn't go to any other page, the person is on the basic page, on the home page, what do we want to actually show the user? So we can just do rest.write homepage, something like this. Then if URL is equal to message, it should be rest.write. Sorry about that. So if it's in the home page, I can just say, welcome to my message page. Welcome to my message page. So once you see this, our server is running. So we can just go back here. So in the slash page, we can see we still have hello server. Let's see what we have here. If this is equal to URL, equals to URL, welcome to home page. Else this, we save this, we are on port 8090, slash is home. Nothing is showing. Let's go back and see. We have rest.write. Okay, so we just have to end this. Rest.end. We also have to end this. Rest.end, something like this. So once we go back and refresh, we have home page. So if we go to the other one, which is the message, you can see welcome to my message page. So you can see we are navigating between routes. We can navigate between the home page. We can navigate between the message page, something like this. So that is basically how to create our route. So now we want to create some dynamic routing whereby we can actually make a request to an API, fetch some data, and actually display the data on the page. That is now what we want to do again now. So let's create another URL. If URL is equal to list, something like this. If user go to a list URL, we want to actually display a list of something for the user to actually see, something like that. So how can we do that? So because we are going to make a request to an endpoint, because we're making a request to an endpoint, we can actually install something which is called the node fetch. Let's go to our listing, our npm.js. So we have the node fetch. We have the node fetch. So let's check it out. What is it? What does it mean? So instead of implementing this in Node.js to run browser-specific fetch payload, why not go from native HTTP to fetch API directly? Hence, Node fetch is a minimal code for window fetch compatible API on Node.js runtime. So we normally use Node fetch for making network calls. We want to get, we want to post, we want to put, we want to patch, we want to delete. So anything you want to do that is network-based calls, Node Fetch can actually help you to do that. So in our native JavaScript, we have the fetch method. So fetch method is used in native JavaScript, that's vanilla JavaScript. But in Node.js, we can now use the Node Fetch to do that instead of trying to use the native fetch method. You can also use the Axios. Yeah, Axios can also allow you to do that. You have other packages that you can use to do that. But for the benefit of this class, I'll be using the Node Fetch to do that. So how do you install it? So you just copy this, go to your browser. Let's stop the server because we want to install something. So we'll just paste this npm I node fetch. If we go to our package.json, we can see the node fetch is installed there for us. So now that we have installed it, we have to import it. So we can import fetch from node fetch. We can import fetch from node fetch. So after we have imported this, now we can use this fetch to actually do whatever we want to do. So in this listing, we want to actually get a URL, a public API. Then once we get this public API, we'll make a request to that public API, then retrieve data from that request and actually see how we can manipulate the data and display some content on our page. So, sorry for that. So once the user goes to this /list, we want to call this fetch. So this fetch is an endpoint we want to call HTTPS. So I want to call this JSON placeholder dot TY. So I want to get the URL .com/users, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a GET request. Let's actually put it in our browser and see if a response is given back to us. Yeah, so we have a response here. So this is actually what we want to do with it. So now we want to use Node.js to make this call and get a response back. So this is a public API that actually gives us some random names of persons, name, their email, their phone numbers, and their address. So if you have used your normal fetch in JavaScript, you can see it takes a callback, which is like a response, which we use then. So then, which will be our res.json. So we have to also use then again to actually get the actual response. But then again, this then can be the actual data that we want, which is also our res. So in this now, we can now actually do what we want to do here. So here we can now say we have this, so we need something here. So we can just say console.log data. So let's see what we have. If we can see the data in our console. So once we go back, we use our node index.js. We are going to /list. So once we go to /list, let's see, did we specify lists? Okay, we did not specify the res. So we can just do res.write. Welcome to my list page. So we have to end it, res.end. So since we have done this, let's go back now and see what we have. Sorry about that. Sorry, give me a moment. Let me get something out of the way. All right, so we have .list. We have welcome to my list page. If I go back to my browser, you can see I have some JSON data returned here for me. I have some JSON data returned here for me. So this JSON data is because of this particular endpoint that I called. So this endpoint is returning some data. So the data is like in a buffer. So I am converting it to a JSON. Once I have converted to a JSON, I am retrieving the actual data and I am putting it down on my console. But now it is on the console, users cannot actually see this. We want to make it available on the page so that users can actually see what we have in this page, maybe in a table, something like that. So let's see how we can do that. So I want to create a variable that is going to hold the actual data for me. So let me say, let's table data be equals to, so I want to get a table. I want to close the table. So this table should have a TR. I want to close the TR. So this is like your normal way of creating a table in HTML. So inside this TR, I want to have some TH. So if we check at this data that was returned for us, let's check for the first one. We have an ID here. So I'm retrieving the ID, not just the ID. I'll retrieve the name, the username, the email, the address, and the phone number. So I'll retrieve the ID. I'll retrieve the name. I'll retrieve the username. I'll retrieve the email. I'll retrieve, after the email, I'll retrieve address. And finally, I will retrieve phone number. Something like this. So I don't want to end this table here because I'll be ending it down because I still need some content again in this table. So I just have my table data here. So now instead of consoling.login this, I want to create a function where I can call this. So I can create a function called create data. So inside this create data, I am passing in this data inside this create data. So I am passing in this data here, and I can also pass in this res. So what is this res here? So this res is like this particular thing here. So instead of having a res here that might clash, so in fact, let's remove the res. Sorry. Let's remove this res. We are just passing in the data in this create data, in this create data. So now if we go down to where we want to create this data, so we can have a function create data that is getting this data from here. So let's just log this to be sure that this data is coming in here. We have removed the log from here and we are calling it here. Let me Control S this and put it directly inside here. Let me format this to make it better. So once we save this and go back to our browser and refresh this, all things being equal, we should have the same output here. So it's actually coming in here. So now we now want to get the data itself. So I'm going to use a loop, a for each loop, data dot for each. For each of them, I'm calling it an element. So each of those elements, this is now where I want to actually append it to this table data. I want to append to this table data. So I can now say table data plus equal to. So in this table data plus equal to, I am having, let me use a template string to do what I want to do. So I'm having my TR. So inside the TR, I'm having a TD, which is getting elements.id. So let's go back and see what we are fetching from here. So we are fetching this ID. So that's why I have this ID here. So that's why I have this ID here. I am closing this, opening another one. After ID, we are fetching name. We are closing this. After name, we are fetching username. We are closing this. After username, we are fetching email. We are closing this. After email, we are fetching address. But the address has other things. It has a street, it has a suit, it has the city, it has the zip code. So I just want to fetch the street. Let me not just fetch everything. Address dot street. So I think the next thing to fetch is the phone. Yeah, which is the phone. So once we have fetched the phone, we'll just end our TR and our TR, and we'll end our table tag. We're ending table tag here. Remember, we created the table somewhere here and we're ending it down here. So once we have done that, let's not end it here because this is not actually where it should end. So once we grab everything from the for each loop, so we can just call this table, this again, table data plus equal to. So we'll just end this somewhere here. And this somewhere here. So this is actually the best place to end this. So once we have done this, instead of using welcome to my list page, I can just set in that table data here. So this table data will be displayed on the page. So I want to give this a border, BORDER, a border of 1. Because every table needs a border, otherwise it will not look like a table. So all things being equal, if there is no issue, once we save this and go back to this page and refresh, so we can see this table out here for us, showing the ID of the users, the name, the username, the email, the address, and the phone number. So this is actually how to render some tests from an API. So this is the API that we have. We use .then to convert the buffer response to a JSON. So the JSON, we are getting the data out of the JSON, and we are calling this function, which is a create data, and we are passing this data to it. We are passing this data to it. So once we have passed the data to it, we are now writing whatever that is being returned from this data, which is the table data, and we are now ending the response. So this is a function where we created this data that for each, we have the element table data, which we have this TD element.id, but these are the details we need. We need the ID, we need the name, we need the username, the email, the address, and the phone number. So that's what we have here. We are getting the ID of the user, the name of the user, the email of the user, the username also, the address, street specifically, and the phone number. So once we have gotten all this, we are now rendering it on the page. So this is what this endpoint is returning for us. So let's continue. So since we have seen how to do that, so we'll now look at a small project, which is almost the same thing with what we have done, but in this case, we are calling in this swappy.dev API. So this is an API that returns people if we click on it. So let's see what the API returns. So sorry. So we have this API dot result. So once you call this API, you must call this data part, which is this result. So this API is returning users that have name, height, mass, hair color, skin color, eye color, birth year, gender, home world, films they have watched, their species, their vehicles, their starship, the day it was created, the day it was edited, and their URL. So these are various. So everything here is for one user. Everything here is for one user. You can have details for another user here. You can have, so that's almost the same thing with what I have done. So your task now is to actually use this project. So create a Node.js server, and the server should have the following routes. It should have the index page, which is the slash, which will just display welcome text and any dummy image on the page. So this one will just display a welcome text. Then you can use any dummy image on the page. We have the list. This will display the data from the API below in a table. So it will display this data in a table. So what is this table is going to display? So basically what we need for this is we need the name of the user, we need the height, we need the name, we need the height, we need the birth year, we need the gender, and we need the URL. That's basically what you are giving back to us. The name, the height, the birth year, the gender, and the URL. So forget about every other thing. Just give us these few ones that I've mentioned. Just display it on the table. So now that's it. The next one is an error page. So what is this error page? If a user goes to a page that is not this or this, it should display an error page telling the user page not found. So if you go to any other route that is not slash or slash list, it should just display a page not found for the user. So that's basically all for these. And I hope it was a nice video that have walked you through on what the servers are in Node.js. Thank you, and I will see you in the next tutorial.